Hello, welcome back. So now that we have gone through the user interface portion, we're going to go and look a little bit into the code behind it. I'm going to be covering just the transaction services, which is the fee services, and the trigger rule evaluator. For this one, these are for my dynamic fees. They are powered by JSON, and they allow us to do things like the extra adult fees, cancellation, the pet fees, and overage fees, and none of it requires any of these to be hard-coded. So let's get into it. So we've got our constructors built. These builds hold all of our fee rules and our auditing services, so it logs the information for us. And then we'll store them. So our first method we have is our applied trigger transaction. This method will calculate all the triggered fees for the reservation. It takes in a reservation, it takes the base cost, it takes in the number of nights, and then it returns the transaction summary to my data transfer. And then it initializes the results for this, and it will head on to start canceling, to seeing if we cancel fees and if things are triggered. So this is going to start looping through our transaction types. It will filter out anything that's not applicable, and then it determines how many units are applied based on the rules and what's provided from the reservation, and then it determines the amount of units applied. So this is for like the threshold and stuff. If the fee has 0 units, then it is, if it's canceled. Cancellations also can have 0 units because they are not part of a unit evaluation system. So then it deserializes the JSON, and so it's going to go through and look at all of the different calculation types. So the different rules that we picked earlier, our stack amount, we have our percent of the balance per night, and all of that. And so it's going to parse through our dictionary that we have, and if the JSON is invalid, it's going to skip it. So only valid JSON. That's why we have a builder in place, so that it sets it up correctly, and we don't have any issues with someone that doesn't understand how to set up JSON correctly. Next, it's going to calculate the total fee. Depending on the calculation type, it has different formulas set for each one, and that's how it goes through and calculates it. And then we have it, so it's going to log it into our audit service, and it takes all of that information, and this will be helpful later for populating out reports and things like that. And then it adds to the results, and it only adds the results list if the fee has, the fee total is greater than 0. And it does, if the units are true, it calculates the unit cost as well. So, and then it returns the results as well. So let's say that our triggered fee is not a standard one, but a cancellation. So we're going to go through our get best cancellation transaction next. This one will look through the transaction types as well. This one's all going to be based on hours. The system works fairly similar, but it's going to look for the most hours that are still valid. So like I was explaining earlier, if your fee has like a 3-day policy and a 2-day policy and a 1-day cancellation policy where the fees are different. This will look for which highest cancellation, like a 72-hour cancellation. If you're valid for that, it will apply that one instead. But if not, then it will go and keep decreasing the fee that it goes for based on which has the highest amount and is still valid. So it still has the same possibility to use the same JSON rules. For the most part, the daily rate is going to be the total that is used, just simply because, at least for the 24-hour. But I wanted to keep it as dynamic as possible so that you do have statics and percentage values as well. And so it's going to take all the information that it gets from the JSON, and then it's going to build a new transaction. And all of these will populate into the admin's transaction portion. And that is just anything that was applied in the system to a user. And then it's going to return the best transaction. And next we have our audit service, and this is just where everything is coming in and getting logged. I do have console write-outs just so if you want to watch the output, you're able to see what is being logged. Next, we're going to go over the trigger rule evaluator. And this one is going to start with our evaluation. So all of these are being triggered through our other methods that were called in the fee service. So the fee service is the first portion that it is passed to, where it verifies if it is an actual fee and if it's going to be triggered. And if it determines that it is a fee that should be triggered, then it will go and evaluate the units. So our first evaluation runs through the JSON, and so for our evaluator, it does check to make sure that there's no white space, because that is not valid for it. After that, it's going to run through the JSON similar to what the transaction service did. But this one gets a little more in-depth with the operators. It will actually see if it's greater than, equal to, less than. It will then check for like all the required stuff, so you have your fields. And so it's pretty much a evaluator to break down exactly what is happening. You have your field, the value, your operator's down here. So what it's doing is it is making sure that all of the required components are there. You have your field, your operator, your value. And then when those, even if those are there, to make sure they are valid. So things like the operator, you have to have a specific setup. And this is what is happening behind the scenes in my UI builder. It has your different operators. It's just translated into a more user-friendly verbiage. So it's going to check and make sure you have those. It extracts the values as strings. So what it's going to do is look through and see if the property is directly on the reservation object. And then if it's not, it's going to look at the dynamic data. And then if it doesn't, if it doesn't exist on the reservation, it looks at the dynamic data. And then if the field doesn't exist at all, the rule doesn't apply. And so then it returns a false. And then it converts both of the values into decimals for comparisons. And then we run through our operators, and then it will return false if any of these requirements are not valid. So now that we've determined that the JSON is valid and it is a trigger, now it's going to evaluate the actual unit portion. So when you have a base included, like with the adults, you're allowed to have 2 free ones. The base included subtracts those units from the overall unit. So let's say you have a max unit of 6, but you have a base included of 2, then you have a 4-unit scale in which the trigger applies. And so it's going to run through and evaluate if how many units there are and charge them. So here's where it's doing your base and then your value of units. So let's say you had the max of 6, it would subtract your 2, and then it would return those 4 units, and then those would be applied in the transaction service. And I did create a unit evaluator for my cancellations. There's no actual units in it, so it's only checking for the hours before and using those as units. So it'll pretty much, if it's valid, return a unit of 1. If not, it returns units of 0. And then no fee is applied. And actually, I am going to cover a little bit on how it is engaging with my summary page, just to show you the method in which we are pulling the dynamic data in and running through the fees. So I have a method for updating extra fees. So this is working with my front end and my JavaScript to help this be a dynamic update, that as you add more units to your reservation, the fee is updated as well correctly. So we have this one where it's going to load your reservation and all of your data, and then it's going to refresh that as well. And then it takes the number of days, which is the end date from the start date. So it's just calculating those for you. And then it gets my dynamic data from the input. So the fields where it is dynamic data, it gets them all. And then it pulls all the dynamic fields that are marked to be evaluated as transactions in this portion, so that you're not running and triggering every single fee you have built that doesn't need it. So this one should not populate any of the cancellation fees, since they are not marked for additional information transactions. And then it's going to process all of the dynamic data, and then it is going to build us a dictionary. After it goes through building our dictionary, then we're going to use our audit service. It does clear it, and then it inputs the new values into the audit transaction service. And then after that, it's going to return a new cost summary so that it can be used to update our UI on the front. And then we'll just go real quick into the one last portion. So where this one builds and stores the dynamic data, this one down in our checkout is going to assign it, so, or apply it into our actual end transaction, and then so that it's included in a part of our actual transactions before they save and are paying for it. This system allows, with the new creation of transactions, us to be able to pull them into our reports and our reservation histories. And that is all that I have to go over today. Thank you for your